What's going on YouTube? It's Teach, back again with another video, and today giving you another updated 3-round 2023 NFL mock draft. Excited to bring it your way, and hey, this will be the last full entire mock that is done in the month of March. Next week we'll start in March and then carry over into April, which means we're that much closer to the NFL draft getting underway, which makes me super excited. Hopefully you all are excited for this video. Be sure to hit the like button if you are enjoying today's video. Be sure to subscribe and of course comment down below your thoughts, takeaways. Who's your favorite squad? Do you like the picks that gave your favorite team? Who goes too high? Who goes too low? Love to hear all your thoughts. Today's round 1, tomorrow will be round 2, and we'll close it out on Sunday with round 3. But with all that down, let's jump right into it with the Carolina Panthers picking at number 1. We'll go C.J. Stroud, and we'll follow it up with Bryce Young at 2 to the Houston Texans. Won't deliberate too long on these just because it's the chalk way of doing it right now. If it was me, Bryce Young would go 1. He is my QB1, and it's a pretty clear tier of his own in my opinion. But that being said, I understand where guys like Frank Reich and Josh McCown, and you see the pro day, conversations between some of those guys and Stroud after Stroud's pro day at Ohio State, and it's like, man, well, it's kind of hard to not have that heavy lean towards Stroud being the number 1 pick, and also it doesn't really affect the rest of the mock because let's just say Bryce Young does go 1. I think C.J. Stroud's going to be the very next pick. So Carolina, Houston, they both get their future franchise quarterbacks, which is super exciting to those two fan bases. And then we're going to go ahead and have a trade here. Now, this one will definitely fall under the camp of more fun to think about and to kind of theorize on what all could ultimately break down. But hey, man, I'm going to make the case for it. And here is the trade. And again, mockdraftdatabase.com. It's their trade simulator. Don't beat me over the head with the picks. But number 3 and then 96 going to Atlanta, and Arizona returns 844 and then a future second rounder from the Falcons. Trade happens. And then my justification here is that Atlanta should take quarterback Anthony Richardson. And the reason I say that is because, one, let's just start with, Falcons fans who are probably telling me how much they hate this. They don't want to give up draft capital, and I hear you. You do get another top 100 pick back from Arizona at the cost of 2 seconds, one this year, one next year. Sure. A team with a lot of holes in their roster, no doubt about it. Could they use those picks? Sure. But if you're excited about Desmond Ridder, imagine having the bigger, faster, stronger-armed version of that in Anthony Richardson. And also, really what this came down to in my mind was Arthur Smith. I mean, this is a big year for him. And, if the Falcons look rough, are we sure he gets out of this season? I think he's going to be on a relatively hot seat. Did the team feel like they got better last year? Sure. But the results are going to be what it comes down to. So you could say, hey, if Ridder doesn't work out, they're picking in the top 5, just like, Houston and Davis Mills. But look what happened to Lovie Smith. Look what happened to David Culley, right? And I don't think those were permanent fixtures at the head coaching spot, more so placeholders for the Texans. But nevertheless, hopefully the point is still clear. Yeah, if Ridder's bad, Atlanta could be positioning themselves to be in the top 5 maybe in 2024 to get a Drake May, to get a Caleb Williams, get some of the other guys that may rise up boards. But will Arthur Smith be the guy making that pick and, being the head coach for that new quarterback? I would have to say no if they're picking in the top 5. I would heavily doubt that. Meanwhile, if you take Anthony Richardson here, yeah, you could still sit for a year. I'm in the camp of let's just see Anthony Richardson. I think he needs more starting experience. So let's just roll him out there. But nevertheless, you could still try out Desmond Ridder. And let's say Ridder looks good, but you're still committed to Richardson. Well, congratulations. You turned this 3rd-round pick into something more valuable. That's a good return on investment. That's awesome. Or if Ridder looks bad, but because you drafted Anthony Richardson, there might be enough promise and potential that Arthur Smith does make it to 2024. He'll be on a hot seat. But if Anthony Richardson works out, then all is forgiven. So I think it makes a lot of sense for what Arthur Smith and his potential timeline could be. So, and I also just like Atlanta being aggressive. Yeah, they have holes in the roster, but you find an upgrade at quarterback, and everything else will kind of fall into place. And if they're in on Lamar Jackson, well, they said they're not in on Lamar Jackson. Would they be a good fit for Lamar Jackson? Absolutely. So instead of giving up 2 1s for Lamar, you give up 2 2s and then swap 8 and 3 to get Anthony Richardson. A little bit more risk, but there's also a lot of excitement, and you'd have the rookie contract instead of the Lamar Jackson contract. So I think it makes a lot of sense. Now, again, this falls into the camp of more fun to think about than realistic, but hey, still got a month to go to until the NFL draft, so let's have some fun in these mocks. Let's play around with some different trade ideas, and I do think Arizona, if possible, would like to move back. Anyways, long point to discuss and break down there, but Will Levis then, the only quarterback left, going to have to be the guy for Indianapolis. I'm starting to think that Anthony Richardson is the guy that they're looking for, but If the top three, or three of the top four are gone, and Levis is all that remains, then the pick is very easy then. And I would like to see Will Levis and all his tools work with a guy like Shane Steichen, who worked with Justin Herbert, made the best of Jalen Hurts, right? Like, he's made a lot of he's had a lot of success in his career working with guys who maybe weren't finished products and weren't completely polished by the time Steichen got their hands on them. So could he do the same thing with Will Levis? I think it'd be a really fun fit. And then Indianapolis, congratulations. You have your potential future franchise quarterback in the room. So then that takes us to Seattle. Pretty easy pick here, Will Anderson. And I do think Jalen Carter is still going to go somewhere in this 5-6 range. But for the sake of today's mock, I do want to play around with something a little different. But ultimately, if you were to ask me, do I think Jalen Carter goes in the top 6? I would say yes. But here with 4 quarterbacks going 1, 2, 3, 4. Real easy decision for Seattle. They haven't really added anything new to the edge group. And Will Anderson, maybe a little light, but plays bigger than that 245 he's listed at, and is the most NFL-ready pass rusher in this year's class. There's a reason he's in that blue chip category for me. Can win with speed and bend, but also has good power. Again, plays bigger than that 245, so I also think you're getting some run defense reinforcements. And this is the dream scenario for Seattle. Have quarterbacks go 1, 2, 3, 4, and then, especially if you're not in the quarterback market, Will Anderson or Jalen Carter, whichever one you think is the better fit for that defense. And because they've already added a couple, those 3-4 DNs, Will Anderson becomes a pretty logical add to that defense. That takes us to Detroit. Now, I am not going to go Jalen Carter here, but ultimately, if I were to try to predict the pick, I think that ultimately would be the route I would go. But let's have some fun, do a little something different here. Tyree Wilson, feels like it's been a long time since I mocked Wilson to Detroit. Now, look, I understand James Houston was a great story last year, but there was a reason why he wasn't a first-round pick despite being a good story, right? Like, he's 6'1" and about 240, 245 pounds. To me, that screams out DPR. Because, think, I've been describing BJ Ojulari as someone who is going to get drafted and probably immediately just be a DPR. Maybe he can add some weight, add some strength in his profile, and become a more reliable early downs guy to stop the run. I don't know if James Houston really ever has that in the making. Hey, him having a rookie season he did last year already proved my expectations wrong for the guy, so never say never. But if we're just talking in a realm of reality, more often than not, he's probably not going to be a guy who's a high-level run defender, if we're just being honest with ourselves. So imagine having an edge set of Tyree Wilson and Aiden Hutchinson, and then you rotate James Houston in as that DPR pass rush specialist on, passing downs. And then because Tyree Wilson is so big, he is 6'6", he's around that 280-pound mark with 86-inch wingspan, he can kick inside. He can be that when you go into nickel, be that guy who's rushing from the interior. So I think this makes his pass rush really, really scary. It's a body type that they don't have. And also, I think I don't want to say relegate, because that typically comes with a negative connotation, but I think it moves James Houston into a role where he can continue to be an awesome story, but focus on him being a pass rusher where he's a little small, a little light, maybe will get picked on in the run game. So I think this fit does make a lot of sense for Detroit. Sure, do I think they go in a different direction? Absolutely. Edge is already kind of a spot that I think they're all right at, but adding one more guy into the mix and moving Houston to that DPR role makes this pass rush really, really scary. Anyways, let's move on to the Las Vegas Raiders now. I'm going to make this Christian Gonzalez. Real easy one here. Patrick Graham in that defense needs a number 1 shutdown corner, and Christian Gonzalez has that potential written all over him. Got the size, got the athleticism, and scheme flexibility. You can play man, zone, on the line of scrimmage, or off. So, not much that I can add more to that. Basically, Christian Gonzalez can fit whatever Patrick Graham wants to throw at him. And Patrick Graham typically is a DC that does mix up his coverages pretty evenly. So this is kind of a match made in heaven for me. Then we get to the Arizona Cardinals. I think they can add to this secondary. And I don't want to rule out the possibility of multiple corners going in the top 10. And Devon Witherspoon, after you lose Byron Murphy, feels like a good add to that secondary and gives them that potential shutdown number 1 corner that they desperately need. Now, if this was me, I'd probably go Joey Porter Jr., but I could see where day one, the man press ability and NFL readiness of Devon Witherspoon maybe does give him the bump over Joey Porter Jr. Nevertheless, I know the Cardinals need to address a lot of other positions in the trenches, but here in the top 10, you've moved back from 3 to 8, and you get to add a replacement for what you lost in Byron Murphy. And who knows, might be a better scheme fit for whatever they're going to do moving forward. But also, I think Witherspoon, willing tackler, and Jonathan Gannon, if he has his way, there's going to be some man in there, but it's also going to be a lot of cover 4, a lot of quarters. So I think Witherspoon is more than capable of doing that. If you can play man, I think you're more than comfortable in playing in quarters. So that takes us to the Chicago Bears. And I'm pretty much going to lay out what I think the ideal talent, round 1, round 2 haul is going to be for Chicago. It is going to take a move up in the second round to get the other guy I think they would love to add, would be a perfect fit. Now, of course, the off-the-field stuff, Jalen Carter's not going to be for everybody, and I totally get it. I respect it, but man, he is we were talking about Chicago having to stay in the top 4, so they can add a guy like this who is a perfect fit in that Matt Eberflus defense as that disrupting 3 tech that he needs. And that's why they brought in DeForest Buckner. Could Jalen Carter be that? I think as a football player, absolutely. And to me, and again, taking away the off-field stuff, it's him and Will Anderson as the best non-quarterbacks in this class. And I've said pretty much the whole cycle, I'd have Jalen Carter as the 1A, Will Anderson as the 1B. So Chicago adds a phenomenal football player. But again, I understand because of the non-football related stuff around Jalen Carter, he might not be for everybody. And who knows, maybe the Bears are out on him. But you're still seeing a lot of mocks where he's going in the top 10. And again, I don't really think he makes it past the top 6, if I'm honest with you. Next up, the Philadelphia Eagles. I'm going to give him Brian Branch here. I mean, you lose Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. Is this not a perfect replacement? I know Brian Branch's combine showing wasn't anything to write home about, but I think this is one of those guys, kind of like Kyle Hamilton from a year ago, where it's like, check the NGS, field speed, and I think that will give you an idea of how much ground he can actually cover versus maybe a little bit of a lackluster 40, but a great tackler. You can use him in the blitzing department. Great man, great in zone, can play the nickel, could be a strong safety. I feel like I'm kind of describing Chauncey Gardner-Johnson here. So love Brian Branch as that CJ Gardner-Johnson replacement here. And I think at 10, some people are going to call this rich, but Brian Branch is just a good football player, and I think good football players go relatively early. I mean, I remember a lot of mocks where Kyle Hamilton was falling in the 20s and stuff like that, but still goes in the top half of the first, and I think the same is going to be true for Brian Branch. Next up, the Tennessee Titans, and I'm going to have a trade here with Tennessee, and they're going to trade places with Washington. So we get AFC, NFC swap here, which makes this trade a little bit easier to put together. Sometimes teams get weird trading in conference and furthermore in division. So this is going to be Washington giving up 16 and 47, getting back 11 and 72. And again, this about adds up on the Jimmy Johnson trade chart, and it works here in the simulator. So hate me if you must, but nonetheless, with 2 corners going to the top 10, that third, top tier guy in this class, in my opinion, Joey Porter Jr. becomes that much more coveted, and he would be an awesome add to that Washington secondary. They clearly need a number 1 corner, and I think he's a perfect fit for that Jack Del Rio defense. He's gotten better and better year over year at Penn State, has the size at 6'2.5", the arm length at 34 inches, and a 4.45 40 is more than serviceable. Can go win at the catch point too. Like, he's a pretty good guy in the air, and a lot of that comes back to his size and arm length, and of course, NFL, legacy child here with his dad winning Super Bowl with the Steelers. But I'd love to see him in black and gold, absolutely. But honestly, I've had a lot of mocks where he makes it to 16. And especially if there's 2 corners gone in the top 10, I just don't think that's all that plausible. So one to account for that here, and it takes Washington moving up, but they get their number 1 shutdown guy. Next, the Houston Texans. I'm going to give them Nolan Smith. I just feel like this is a tone and a culture fit for DeMeco Ryans. I just feel like getting a guy who was a team captain on one of the best defenses in college football last year, and then one of the key cogs in the mix. Yeah, didn't see the field as much as everyone else, but I think that's just because Georgia's 2021 roster was stacked. So nonetheless, he was still a key component of that defense as well. Adding him into a team and a roster that doesn't really have that double-digit sack a year type of guy on paper right now. And Nolan Smith, I think, has that potential. Freaky athlete, already a high-level run defender, so he's showcasing that, can figure it out. And, he had some interviews where he's, hey, with the alignment, I didn't really get to take on tackles one-on-one. And if I did, I think my numbers would paint a different picture. And I do think some of that was the case with Travon Walker, and if we applied it to Walker, I think we have to apply it here to Nolan Smith. So I think part of the reason for lackluster pass rush production is how Georgia, lines up those front 7 defenders. And some of it is also he's raw as a pass rusher. But for a Houston team that still probably at least another offseason away, I don't mind adding a little bit more of a raw prospect when it comes to being a pass rusher. Give him a year's worth of work, let him develop, and then if he takes that step forward in year 2, Houston gets really, really scary. So love to see them add this type of piece into a defense that desperately needs edge, and he feels like a good guy to add into that locker room. Young player, but just has that maturity and kind of leadership factor about him that I think DeMeco Ryans would really, really covet. Next, the New York Jets. Now, of course, I'm recording this on Thursday, so not too early in advance, but this is going out Friday at noon, which probably means this trade is going to go down right when I push out this video. Ultimately, I do kind of think that the Jets might have to give up 13, but with the Elijah Moore trade, which we'll talk more about in tomorrow's video, Maybe they can give up 2 2s or a 2 this year and a 2 next year. I don't know. I'm not sure which side really actually has leverage here. So I'm just kind of sitting and waiting for the news to break, which of course is going to probably happen as soon as this video goes out. But let's just say in this world, the Jets are sticking and picking. And oh my gosh, look, Paris Johnson Jr., OT1 on my board, has fallen into their lap. Perfect. Pair him up with Mekhi Becton. I would assume you would keep Becton on the right side here if you were to add Paris Johnson Jr., but you could certainly flip Paris Johnson Jr. over to the right side. He did play right guard 2 years ago for Ohio State, so maybe he's a little more comfortable making that flip versus Becton. But nonetheless, man, if Becton stays healthy, if Paris Johnson works out, this could be an unbelievable tackle duo. Both guys who are huge, 6'6" Paris Johnson, Mekhi Becton was like 6'7", right? But also really good athletes, a lot of strength between these two guys. So this would make for a really, really awesome offensive line. You keep Lincoln Thompson, hopefully he gets better in year 2 in New York, and then Alijah Tucker kicks back inside to play guard. You got Wes Schweitzer there, who's been starter for multiple years in his career at the center spot. All of a sudden, that offensive line is looking really, really good in New York. And man, if OT1 falls into their lap, a lot of Jets fans are going to be really, really psyched about that. Next, the New England Patriots. I'm going to give them wide receiver Quentin Johnston. He becomes the first wideout off the board. Past few mocks, I've been doing Jackson Smith-Njigba. One to flip it back. Always trying to change it up a little bit. Don't want you guys watching the same mock week in and week out. But Quentin Johnston, do I think the Patriots could add Jackson Smith-Njigba? I guess it's plausible. But then you're overlapping skill sets with Juju Smith-Schuster, who they added as a Jakobi Meyers replacement. So to me, the top outside-based wide receiver is Quentin Johnston. You're adding some dynamism to that wide receiver room that they desperately need. Like, seriously, look at that wide receiver room and who's the threat with their ball in their hands. I'll wait. And then also you're adding that over-the-top speed, great ability to go win it in the air, someone who can just basically push the ball down the field and try to get that little bit more out of Mac Jones. And with Devontae Parker being a contested catch guy, someone who can work a little bit over the intermediate parts of the field. Juju's great underneath, but also Yak. All of a sudden, that wide receiver room starts to take shape, and you have rounded skill sets in there, and it feels like you can attack different layers of the field and win in different, skill sets and win in different ways, yards after the catch, but also with deep bombs, attacking weak secondaries, so on and so forth. So that would, of course, come down to Quentin Johnston working out, which I know he's not for everybody, but he is my wide receiver one. I believe in the upside, and when called upon, he looked really, really good for TCU, and I think obviously once he gets to the NFL level, he's gonna be leaned on even more heavily, and we'll get to see that freaky athleticism, frame, and speed all kind of put together. Next, the Green Bay Packers at 15. I've long said that Nolan Smith, Lucas Van Ness, these are the guys here for Green Bay at 15, but in this case, I wanted to do something a little different. Peter Skoronski fell this far, and David Bakhtiari, is he going to keep playing? What are they doing at the right tackle spot? Is Zach Tom really ready to be a starter? Elton Jenkins, he's going to play guard, with so much kind of uncertainty long-term across that offensive line. I could see this being a way where it's like, we're not getting Jordan Love a pass catcher, but we are improving the situation directly in front of him across the offensive line. Peter Skoronski, I think, can legitimately play anywhere on the O-line, left tackle all the way through to the right tackle spot. Was recruited at Northwestern to play center. Certainly looks like a guy who could be an awesome guard, but based off his tape, I think this guy can stick at tackle. So it's your David Bakhtiari insurance. He could be your Elton Jenkins insurance. He's battled injuries over the last couple seasons. Or maybe he's a right guard upgrade, or maybe he ultimately ends up playing right tackle. But with his flexibility and position versatility, I think he gives Green Bay an answer no matter what question comes up this year or down the line. Next, the Tennessee Titans, after moving back, and they still get a guy who feels like it would be an awesome add to that offense. Does feel like they're going to keep Derrick Henry. And yes, I know they added Andre Dillard, but for like a little more than $9 a year, that's actually, solid guard money. I still see that move inside being had. Now, I know you kind of look at our lads, you look at the Tennessee Titans offensive line, you could be convinced, well, Andre Dillard's okay. Then they brought in Brent Skill from San Francisco. And then Dylan Radunz, could he move inside to play guard? Do you think he could be a liability? If everything works out, sure. Maybe the names on paper right now are good enough. I'm just going to take Broderick Jones here because you moved back, you got some additional assets, but also just in case, right? Like, there's no guarantee Dillard works. There's no guarantee Radunz is going to be a hit. So maybe you're moving one of your guards over to the right side. No guarantee Nicholas Petit-Frere takes a step forward in year 2, right? So I just like this just to be sure that we're going to have an answer for any sort of problem that comes up across the offensive line. Plus, he does feel like a Tennessee Titan. He fits with that mauling, run game-based offense. And he fell to you at 16. That's pretty undeniable. And I've had him go to the Titans at 11, so it's kind of hard to pass up from that standpoint as well. Pittsburgh Steelers, I'm going to give them Deonte Banks. Obviously, they need a corner. I've said this 1,000 times here on the channel and in these mocks, so no real surprise here. And it's been pretty much corner, then off to tackle at 32 the whole cycle for me and the Steelers, with some variations on that. But nonetheless, my one concern here would be Deonte Banks looks like this awesome man coverage-based corner, 6 foot, 200 pounds. That's what he primarily played at Maryland. Do I think he could do more at the line of scrimmage? Yes, I do. But also a 4.35 40. So just feels like a guy who is like in the making of being a potential superstar man press corner if all works out. On the other side, Patrick Peterson, this guy who's kind of lost a step and gone from an awesome man press corner into a zone specialist. So how do those two coexist on the same defense? Or are you just going to say, hey, Deonte Banks is the next best corner and he runs a 4.35 40 and he's got good size, solid arm length. He can fit in zone. And, maybe it's a little bit of an adjustment period and he starts out as a man specialist who then kind of figures out the zone with some time. Either way you spin it, it's going to take a little bit of some progression and some figuring out, some tinkering with how those two play, and they are drastically different at where they are in their lives and in their careers. But nonetheless, adding a corner for Pittsburgh is awesome, and they have got to add that top tier potential CB1 of the future. So I love the Deonte Banks pick here, and I find myself in each mock, it feels like he goes a little bit earlier. So right now my CB4, I'm a big fan of Banks' game. Let's move on to the Detroit Lions, and it's actually not going to be the Detroit Lions making this pick. I really thought about Bijan Robinson here just because, maybe DeAndre Swift is a piece they part ways with and get some, draft capital back in that trade. But at the same time, man, I'm just looking at Dallas and I'm like, dude, Jerry Jones at this point is just trying to go, pardon my, geekdom here taking over, but he's going full Thanos and Age of Ultron, putting on the gauntlet and saying, I'll do it myself. Like, this guy adds Stephon Gilmore via the trade, and he adds Brandon Cooks. Now, of course, there's other pieces in the mix, other people that deserve credit, but feels like Jerry Jones is trying to will this one into existence. So I'm going to say there's a live possibility. They trade up, they give up their third and fourth rounder, and they take Bijan Robinson. And, the Zeke contract ultimately didn't work out, but, a great way for people to forget about it, drafting the best running back in this year's class. He's also a great receiver. He can win with speed. He can win with elusiveness. He can win with power. And again, the pass game component on top of that. Pair him up with Tony Pollard, who's coming off the injury. Got him for one more year. And then maybe next offseason, I love if they could keep Pollard, but maybe then he becomes the piece you replace. But that element added to the offense is just going to be a compliment to Bijan Robinson. So do I like the idea of trading up for a running back? No. And I'm sure there's a lot of Cowboys fans down below letting me know that they don't like that. And I totally understand it. But man, it's a Jerry Jones-esque win now type of move. And, I feel like you add that running back, that offense looks really, really scary. And I think Jerry Jones might be thinking the same exact thing. Next, Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I'm going to have Darnell Wright come off the board here at 19. This is about as high as I think I've had him go in any of these mocks. You play him at right tackle. You move Tristan Wirfs over to left tackle. I think he's going to fetch a bag whenever they get into his contract talks, but maybe it's more justifiable to give him that money if he is playing left tackle. I could see that being something that Jason Light, their GM, is thinking about. But also, I love Anton Harrison, but I do think the NFL probably likes Darnell Wright a little bit more just because he's a stronger guy. And, I respect it. I get it. But I prioritize just different things. So that's where, the rankings are very subjective. But obviously, after moving on from Donovan Smith, tackle is kind of staring me in the face as a major need for Tampa Bay. And they can still probably add an interior guy, too, after trading Shaq Mason. Yes, edge and, maybe a slot corner. Brian Branch fell this far. That'd be interesting. Pairing him up with Antoine Winfield Jr., these very flexible, versatile safeties. And actually, we'll do something similar along those lines in tomorrow's video. But here, one to address tackle, Darnell Wright felt like a good fit if they are going to move Wirfs over to the left side. Next, Seattle Seahawks. And this is where Jackson Smith-Njigba was going to come off the board. He's just the perfect slot option to add into that offense. You just paid Geno Smith. Why not give him an extra weapon to play with as well? Pair him up with Tyler Lockett, DK Metcalf. That's an insane trio. And you have two guys who can play on the outside who are so vertically based, and then a guy in the slot who runs a sub 6'6" 3 cone, and then that short area burst and explosiveness is just going to eat up underneath and in the intermediate parts of the field. Also a good route runner, has good hands, can go up and win it, at a decent rate too. And man, if he's truly running a 40 between the 4.48 range and the 4.52 range, there might be even more downfield ability than I would have assumed, maybe 2 months ago, maybe a month ago even. So love him being added to this offense. Do I think he becomes wide receiver one off the board? Ultimately, yes, I do think he is that. And, kind of fun idea for him and a landing spot for next week's video. But nonetheless, if he fell all the way down to 20, I would hope Seattle sprints the card, and I would love this guy into that offense. And also, once they move on from Tyler Lockett, I think DK Metcalf, Jackson Smith-Njigba, that could be your 1-2 punch. One guy on the outside, one guy on the inside, and of course, Kenneth Walker still in place. There's tackles, yada, yada, yada. So just add one more young, dynamic threat into that offense and really build that core on that side of the ball. Next up, the Los Angeles Chargers. This is strictly value, best player available type of approach here. Lucas Van Ness. Also, I think the Chargers could still add one more edge rusher just in case Joey Bosa misses substantial time next year, just in case Khalil Mack goes down. Both those guys have battled plenty of injuries in their career. Lucas Van Ness also has that inside flexibility. They signed Morgan Fox, who is coming up on age 29. It's a 2-year contract, good deal too. So no harm, no foul if he doesn't see the field, because it's not like he's really costing you a whole lot against the cap. But in a perfect world, maybe these two could split some time on the inside. Van Ness rotates outside, keeps Bosa and keeps Mack fresh. But really, this is kind of an injury contingency. But also, man, I would love to see Van Ness, Mack, and Bosa all out of the field at the same time. Van Ness played on the inside at Iowa, so I do feel comfortable with asking him to do something similar once you get into passing down, your nickel, your dime set, so on and so forth. But also adding a power rusher. Mack can win with a variety of moves. I don't want to simplify Khalil Mack's game. He's a future Hall of Famer, and Joey Bosa, when he's healthy, absolutely has the skill set to be a Hall of Famer. But those two guys, I think immediately when we come to mind, we think of speed and finesse, and basically them being finesse rushers and being able to win with their hands and some bend and some speed. Van Ness is, he's got a great get off, but he can win with power. So I think you're adding a skill set that, yes, I think the other guys have it, but that is Van Ness's calling card, where I think Bosa and Mack's calling card might be in different areas. So you're just adding another interesting skill set in the mix there for the Chargers. And yes, they could add wide receiver. Yes, they could add tight end. But I want to do something a little different here. And Van Ness falling all the way to 21 would be some extremely good value. Next, Baltimore Ravens at pick 22. Zay Flowers, going to stick with what I know here. The Ravens, I feel like they should go wide receiver round 1. I am still hoping Lamar Jackson is their quarterback under center, and that's coming from a Steelers fan, which doesn't feel right. But nevertheless, adding that speed to that offense, I've said this time and time again, where you lost Hollywood Brown and you lost that trump card. Defenses have got to creep closer and closer to the line of scrimmage to stop that run game. They got to put more bodies in the box. And then Hollywood Brown and some other names, of course, throughout Lamar Jackson's career have been that, okay, well, you crept too far, now we're going to beat you over the top type of guy. Zay Flowers, I think, has that speed, has that deep route running, but he's also really good yards after the catch, satellite type of weapon too. So I even think there's stuff you can do with him, just getting the ball out of Lamar Jackson's hands quickly, or man, put him in the backfield. I want to see a backfield of Lamar Jackson, Zay Flowers, and J.K. Dobbins. Get real creative with it. When you have a player like Zay Flowers, do weird stuff. Make defenses really think, pause, and have to ponder how they're going to play this. That's the type of stuff I think Zay Flowers can add to that offense, on top of course, the deep route running speed and that over-the-top element. Next, the Minnesota Vikings. I'm going to give them Jordan Addison. I've had this happen, I think, one other time in another mock, but you lose Thielen. I definitely think they need to add another guy to carry the load a little bit away from Justin Jefferson's shoulders. I know Addison came in a little bit smaller, a little more light, and we're on the 40 that everyone was hoping, but the guy's a great route runner. And Justin Jefferson, already one of the best route runners in football. Like, DBs are going to have a hard time keeping up with both these guys. But also Addison, I know the 4.49 40 wasn't great, but I think he'll run a better time at his pro day. And if you're watching this, post his pro day, hopefully I'm right. But I even think using him as a clear out guy, I've said this about Quentin Jefferson or Quentin Johnson, and some other videos where he's been mocked to the Vikings. Just someone else that forces defenders to maybe get just a step away from Justin Jefferson, makes him all that more scary, right? Like in that clear out guy, that's exactly what they're designed and drawn up to do. So I just basically think adding that Adam Thielen replacement adds a lot of value to this offense. And, they trade Stephon Diggs, they draft Justin Jefferson, they move on from Thielen. I think wide receiver, if the board plays out this way, is something they're looking to target here. Next up, the Jacksonville Jaguars at 24. I'm going to give them interior offensive lineman O'Cyrus Torrence. I think he's an upgrade over Ben Bartch, who hasn't really ultimately worked out. And let's just say in this scenario, and what we know right now, it does feel like they're kind of comfortable rolling out with Walker Little at right tackle. Haven't gotten to see him on the field a whole lot, but I liked him a lot coming out of Stanford. Battled a lot of injuries, so he fell to the second round, but when he was on the field, the talent was there. So I'm hoping that Walker Little, that's a tough name to say, I don't know why, but hopefully he can stay healthy and he can become that right tackle and a solid replacement for Jawaan Taylor. And then here we find an upgrade on the interior offensive line, replacing Bartch. And this was an offensive line last year, and obviously this is going to change a little bit with Jawaan Taylor being gone, but really good pass blocking unit. little lackluster in the run game, but Travis Etienne's so explosive and so elusive that he kind of made up for that. Man, Etienne running behind O'Cyrus Torrence on that left side of the offensive line would be crazy. And he could open up a lot of holes there and make Etienne that much more scary to face if you're an opposing defense. Next, the New York Giants. A lot of the wide receivers gone. Yeah, maybe you could add someone like a Hyatt or a Downs. I still think of Hyatt as kind of a second-round guy. So I'm going to go back to something I haven't done in quite some time. Drew Sanders. Pair him up with Bobby Okereke, who signed in free agency. But Okereke, not really a blitzer. Sanders, absolutely. That's like the best skill set he brings to the table right away at the NFL level. Played edge at Alabama, transfers over to Arkansas, becomes a starter over the middle of the field. Still needs to improve in coverage and as a run defender, but high-level athlete and a really good pass rusher, and that's kind of what he's been asked to do the most at the college level. So feels like a perfect add for that Wink Martindale defense who wants to blitz his linebackers, wants to run man press on the outside. And with our first 2 picks, that's exactly the type of ammunition we're trying to give, Wink Martindale. Trying to give him those linebackers where he can execute his scheme, and then tomorrow we're going to give him a corner that can play on the outside and give him that little bit more man press ability. Quick note, actually, it's going to be in the round 3 video. I just had to double check my notes there. It's actually going to be in the round 3 video where we add another corner into the mix for the New York Giants. I digress. Let's move on now to the Detroit Lions at 26. They moved back from 18. I still think they get the guy that, in a perfect world, they would want to add. Kalijah Kancey, yes. 2 picks across the defensive line, but they've done enough work in the secondary where I think they can wait. Again, maybe Bijan then should be the pick at 18. I could understand that. But, man, Kalijah Kancey right in between Aiden Hutchinson and Lee McNeil could be really, really scary. And maybe that interior pass rush duo is this mammoth human being, Tyree Wilson, right next to Kalijah Kancey. And then on the edge, you have James Houston and Aiden Hutchinson. Based off of what we think these prospects are going to be and what we saw from Hutchinson down the stretch in Houston last year, that's an awesome 4-man front to be rushing the passer in nickel and in dime and things like that. So, yes, we're doubling down here on the defensive line, but also no guarantee that James Houston replicates what he did last year, right? And no guarantee Lee McNeil is going to continue to play like he did at points last season, right? John Kaminsky, they brought him back, reasonable contract, but can you do better there? I definitely think you can. So, I'm not really in love with doubling down on one position in the first round, but nonetheless, that makes that pass rush for Detroit so scary. On top of the work that you've done raising the floor in that secondary, we are going to address corner in tomorrow's video just to get a little bit extra protection there. And all of a sudden, this Lions defense looks really, really scary. Next, the Buffalo Bills at 27. I'm going to give them a potential Tremaine Edmonds replacement here in Trenton Simpson. Can play sideline to sideline, great coverage player. I've said it many times, safety skill set, but just in a linebacker's body. I think you could even move him over to the nickel and do some creative stuff there. So a guy that, again, in a perfect world, is just a Tremaine Edmonds replacement. It allows you to continue the baseline that you had in the middle of the field last year. Matt Milano, one of the best coverage players, so pairing him up with Trenton Simpson feels like it will be good for Simpson's development, but now you just got a sizable hole in the middle of that defense. Simpson here at 27. Do I think you can get him in a better spot? Yeah, sure. So maybe you trade down, but it takes 2 to tango, right? And in this case, no trade calls came in, so you stick and pick and you take Simpson at 27. And especially with O'Cyrus Torrence off the board, IOL, maybe you wait and address that later on. Next, Cincinnati Bengals at 28. And I want to do something a little different here. Dalton Kincaid, first tight end off the board. And, I'm not really the biggest of Kincaid guys, but comparing him to Michael Mayer, there's a whole lot more dynamism in Kincaid's game, a lot more athletic ability, a lot harder to bring down after the catch, and I just think adding that true middle of the field, yards after the catch, tank of a weapon, good route runner, and a lot more athletic ability than what you'll get out of a Michael Mayer, I could see that that all bundled together could be enough to have him be the first tight end off the board. So again, playing around with something different. And man, if you're the Bengals, yeah, you could draft Michael Mayer. He's kind of a hometown kid, so maybe that's enough to kind of bump it up. But really, if you're the Bengals, you're drafting the best tight end. And I wouldn't be surprised if Kincaid, with his receiving ability, is the guy that they're keying in on versus Mayer, who does a lot of things right, but doesn't have insane top tier potential like maybe Kincaid has because just the athletic ability. So wouldn't be surprised if you add this. Gotta have to replace Tyler Boyd in a year's time. So finding another intermediate over the middle type of weapon in Kincaid, I think goes a long way to eventually replacing Tyler Boyd. Then we get to the New Orleans Saints. Gonna go Brian Brzee here. Kind of feels like a perfect David Onyemata replacement. I think you're getting a high-level run defender pretty much right away at 6'5", a little more than 300 pounds. Good athlete, good moving player at that frame and size. And then you get to just kind of, play build-a-player when it comes to him being a pass rusher. And you got to come up with a skill set, teach him how to, attack offensive linemen. And It may take some time, maybe take a year or two, but if you get the run defense component that you're losing with Onyemata, Onyemata had moments and years where he was a solid pass rusher, but he wasn't Cam Jordan, right? Like he wasn't the dude leading the way there in New Orleans. So I think Brzee can be that run stopping replacement in the middle of that defensive line, and then in 2 years' time, man, I if it all works out, right? This could be a really, really scary player in the middle of that defense. Maybe Cam Jordan's there, maybe he's not. Maybe Peyton Turner takes that step forward and this defensive line continues to be a strength for New Orleans. So they could get some benefit right now, but also a lot of exciting upside down the line for the Saints. Next, Philadelphia Eagles at 30, and Myles Murphy continues to fall in these mock drafts. And it's really nothing against Myles Murphy. I still like him as a player. Just had my edge rankings come out this past week, so definitely go back, check that out if you missed it. But still like him. He's just like Brzee, a project. I think you're getting a good run defender, 6'5", 270, awesome athlete, and kind of the guy that the Eagles would love to bring in and just draft and stash for a year, develop him, and then look out. I mean, with the Eagles' track record of developing players in the trenches, I mean, Myles Murphy, this might be the place for him to go to become the best version of himself. So I remember mocking this months and months and months ago where he went to Philadelphia at 10. So obviously his stock has changed pretty drastically, but I still think if he makes it all the way down to 30, Philadelphia would be very, very interested in adding a guy like Myles Murphy and try to bring that upside to the table down the line. Next up, Kansas City going to stay in the edge group, and I'm going to add Will McDonald to round out the first round portion of this video. And he's just the speed rusher that right now they don't have with the loss of Frank Clark, and I think they could do better than Frank Clark in general. But nonetheless, you have a guy who wins with power and violent hands on one end, and George Karlaftis. Another guy who wins with speed and bend on the other end, and Will McDonald was playing out of position at Iowa State. So I think once he gets to the NFL level and is truly just attacking the outside shoulder of offensive tackles, he's going to hit another gear. He's going to become a really, really special player at the NFL level. And I think at 31 in a loaded edge group, that's some awesome value there for the Kansas City Chiefs. They could wait and maybe add a different guy, but I also think Will McDonald at 31 is pretty solid value, like I said. And one final note on the Chiefs, I'm not going to go off the tackle in this mock. I'm almost thinking about, I like Darian Kennard out of Kentucky a fair amount in last year's draft. 6'5", 321. I almost wonder if he ends up playing right tackle for them. So I'm going to forego off the tackle this mock draft for the Chiefs. But if you're a Kansas City fan, let me know. Do you think they add a tackle for that right tackle spot? Or how are you feeling about Darian Kennard and Lucas Niang? Maybe those options do ultimately become the starters at right tackle. But everyone, that is going to do it for the round one portion of this updated mock draft. Let me know what you think down below in the comment section. Who goes too high? Who went too low? And of course, who's your favorite team? And are you excited about the pick I gave your squad in the first round? Be sure to come back tomorrow for round two. But until then, my name is Teach, and I am signing off.